I never meant to stay the night. The rain had started around midnight, soft at first, then thick and endless, blurring the windows of the guest room I hadn't planned on using. She offered it without looking at me, just pointed down the hallway and said, "You'll find extra blankets in the chest." That was her way. Direct, never unkind, but with a distance I hadn't learned how to cross yet. Her name is Helen. My wife's mother. 46. Always put together, always tired. She smiles like it costs her something. And I'd spent years trying not to notice how she held her coffee like it burned, or how her voice always dropped when she was too honest. I'd married into their family quickly. Too quickly. Emily and I, her daughter, had met, loved, and leapt, the way young people do when they want to outrun something. I think we both wanted to be chosen. But the cracks started showing fast, and when Emily left for her sister's wedding last week, I stayed behind. That's when Helen and I ended up alone in the house. It wasn't supposed to mean anything. I helped fix her leaky faucet. She folded my laundry even though I asked her not to. We sat in the kitchen one night too long, 2 mugs of chamomile going cold between us. She talked about her husband. Not mine, hers. How she thought she'd feel freer now that he'd left, but just felt less interrupted. And then she looked at me. Really looked. That was the first time I felt it, not desire, not even temptation. Just, seen. Like I wasn't invisible. Like someone finally noticed how tightly I was wound, and didn't ask me to perform. We didn't talk about it. The moment passed, or we pretended it did. But after that, every shared silence was heavier. Tonight was different, though. She found me staring out the kitchen window, barefoot, holding a warm beer I didn't even want. She walked in wearing a robe. Not one of those thin, lacy things. No, this was thick, almost matronly. But it made her feel more real somehow. More human. "You can't sleep either?" she asked. I shook my head. Too loud. She poured herself tea. Sat down. Didn't offer me any. The kitchen felt like a church, quiet, echoing, intimate in a way it shouldn't have been. She kept her eyes on her mug, but I could feel her pulse in the air between us. "I keep thinking," she said, finally, "that I made every right decision at the wrong time." I didn't know how to answer that. So I said nothing. Just watched her fingers trace the rim of her cup. She looked up. "Do you ever wonder if you're living the life you meant to?" "All the time," I said. "But I'm not sure I'd know what the right one feels like." And then she did something small. Almost nothing. She reached across the table and touched my wrist. Not my hand. My wrist. Just a soft press of her fingertips against the inside, where the skin is thinner, more sensitive. My breath caught, just for a second. She didn't move. Neither did I. Then came the sound. The front door unlocking. She blinked. I turned toward the hallway. And in that fragile, charged pause, before we knew who had come home early, we stayed exactly like that. Connected. Suspended. And not nearly as sorry as we should have been. It wasn't Emily. Just the neighbor's kid bringing back a borrowed drill. Helen and I both breathed again, but didn't say anything about the way we'd reacted. We didn't go back to touching, either. She stood, too fast, muttered something about needing to check the laundry, and left the kitchen like it had turned dangerous. I didn't follow. I stayed at the table, eyes locked on the groove her mug had left on the wood. The truth is, I married her daughter because I was tired of waiting for someone to choose me. My own mother left when I was 12, and I'd spent years quietly begging women to stay without ever saying a word. Emily was soft-spoken, kind, and in love with the idea of being in love. We mistook comfort for connection. We'd been sleeping in separate rooms long before she left town. And Helen? Helen was the first person who looked at me like I wasn't a placeholder. She came back into the room barefoot, arms crossed, like she was holding herself together. "Sorry," she said, though she didn't need to. Just thought, I don't know. You thought Emily was back. She nodded. Sat back down, this time across from me instead of next to me. She used to draw all over the walls, she said suddenly. When she was little. In crayon, marker, anything she could find. I was always yelling about it. Scrubbing them clean every week. And now? I'd give anything to have those drawings back. I didn't know what to say. So I said what I felt. You were a good mom. She laughed, once. Bitter and small. I was present. That's not always the same thing. I looked at her hands. They were still. Resting in her lap like they didn't trust themselves. How long were you unhappy? I asked before I could stop myself. With her father? I nodded. Her eyes shifted toward the window. Since I was 24. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was heavy. Like something buried between us had just surfaced. She turned to me then. You're not happy either. It wasn't a question. I didn't answer. Not directly. Just looked at her and said, I used to think that if I tried hard enough, I could make someone love me back. She closed her eyes. And for a moment, her face looked so tired it hurt to see it. Then, without a word, she stood, walked over to me, and did something that shouldn't have meant anything. She reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear. It was a small, tender gesture. But it said everything we weren't allowed to say. Her fingers lingered. And neither of us moved. She dropped her hand first. No words. Just a flicker in her eyes, like something had snapped back into place. Like she'd remembered who I was. Who she was. What this was. Helen stepped away from me as if the air between us had caught fire. I shouldn't have done that, she said. Quiet, clipped. I opened my mouth to answer but didn't know what to say that wouldn't make it worse. She turned toward the hallway. I'm going to bed. Wait, I said, but it came out too soft, almost broken. She didn't stop. I paced for 20 minutes before I followed. Not to her room. I wasn't that reckless. Just down the hall. Just close enough to feel stupid and pathetic and angry at myself for feeling all three at once. But then her door creaked open. And there stood Helen, robe tied tightly, face unreadable in the hallway light. I couldn't sleep, she said. I stepped forward. Me neither. The silence hung again, thick as storm air. We didn't touch this time, but it felt like we were both leaning towards something unspoken. My hand twitched at my side. Don't, she whispered, eyes wide. Don't make this harder. Then, a voice behind us. What's going on? Emily. I froze. Helen's daughter, my wife, stood at the end of the hall, suitcase still in hand, her eyes flicking between us. She hadn't heard anything. Probably. But something in her face said she felt everything. Just talking, Helen said quickly, too quickly. He couldn't sleep either. Emily narrowed her eyes. It's 2 a.m. I know, I said, trying to smile. We were just catching up. She didn't buy it. But she didn't push either. Okay, she said, finally. I'm going to bed. As she disappeared into her old bedroom, the door shutting with an echo, Helen looked at me like she was seeing a version of herself she didn't like. Go, she whispered. Please. So I did. I lay in bed that night with the ceiling fan spinning slowly above me, heart still racing like I'd sprinted across a minefield. This had to stop. Whatever was happening, it had to end before it went too far. But then I heard it. A knock. Soft. Barely there. I opened the door. Helen stood there again, no robe this time. Just a long t-shirt, her hair down, her arms crossed over her chest like she didn't trust herself. I can't sleep, she whispered. I didn't answer. She didn't move. And in that moment, my body screaming, my thoughts spiraling, I realized something terrifying. I didn't want her to leave, she didn't cross the threshold. Helen stood at the door of the guest room like she wanted to run and stay at the same time. Her eyes scanned my face, quick, careful, and trembling underneath all that practiced stillness. "I shouldn't be here," she said. I nodded, but I didn't ask her to leave. Something between us was fraying, or fusing. I couldn't tell. "Emily asked me today if I still believed in love," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. And I couldn't answer her. That hit harder than I expected. I sat on the edge of the bed. "And do you?" She exhaled sharply. "Not like this." Then, she stepped in. Just a few inches, just enough for the door to click shut behind her. Her bare feet curled slightly on the carpet. She was shaking, only a little, but I saw it. In her fingers, in the way she didn't meet my eyes. "I keep telling myself this is just loneliness," she said. "Just the house being too quiet. Just needing something temporary. But then I remember how you looked at me that night in the kitchen." I stood, almost without meaning to. We were close now. Closer than we'd ever allowed ourselves to be. "I didn't mean to," I said quietly. "Look at you like that." She looked up. Her eyes were shining now, wet but unfallen. "But you did." We were quiet. Too quiet. My ears rang with it. My hands felt like they didn't belong to me. She reached out, again, not for a kiss, not for my hand. Just a touch. Fingers grazing my chest. Light, almost unsure. It felt like 1,000 confessions all at once. "Emily's pregnant," she whispered. I blinked. "What?" "She didn't tell you yet." "But she told me. Today." Helen pulled her hand back like it had burned her. And I didn't know what to say to her. Because all I could think about was you. A deep, slicing silence followed. She covered her mouth with her hand. Her eyes squeezed shut. "What is wrong with me?" I wanted to pull her close. I didn't. "You're not broken," I said. "I'm her mother," she whispered, barely audible. "I'm her husband." The words felt heavy now. Almost foreign. Hollow. A pause. "I should go," she said. But she didn't move. "I don't want you to," I admitted. "And I hate that I don't." We stared at each other, everything trembling between us. Time slowed. The air was thick, charged. She stepped forward. I did too. Our lips were inches apart now. One breath. "That's all." Then, Emily's voice, down the hall, "Mom? Where are you?" We froze. Helen's body stiffened. And that's where we stayed, mouths parted, hands twitching, a single decision away from ruin. Helen stepped back first. The moment shattered like glass between us, Emily's voice pulling us down from whatever cliff we were standing on. Helen turned fast, opened the door without a word, and walked out into the hall like nothing had happened. I stood there, my pulse roaring in my ears. Mouth still slightly open. Almost. Almost. The next morning was too quiet. Emily made breakfast. I sat at the table. Helen didn't come down. "She's been off," Emily said, cracking eggs. "Even before she found out." "Found out what?" I asked, playing dumb, the lie already digging into my gut. Emily glanced at me, then back at the pan. "About us. About the baby." I swallowed. "She didn't seem surprised when you told her." "I didn't tell her," Emily said slowly. I looked up. "What?" "I was going to. Last night. But when I came home and saw you too," she trailed off, eyes narrowing. She already knew. Blood drained from my face. She had lied. "She said you told her," I muttered, mostly to myself. "I didn't." Emily's voice sharpened. Why would she lie about that? Because she needed a reason to be near me. Because she didn't want to feel like the only one falling. Because the baby, Emily's baby, had become a wall between us. And she'd kicked a hole in it. Emily's eyes scanned my face like she was trying to find something I was hiding. Did something happen while I was gone? I hesitated. Too long. Forget it, she snapped. I already know. Emily, she shoved the pan off the stove, the eggs burning. I'm not blind, you know. I saw the way she looked at you. I just didn't want to believe it. I stood up. Nothing happened. Nothing, she laughed, dry, cold, disbelieving. God, you don't even know what you want, do you? I didn't answer. Because she was right. And because silence was easier than admitting I'd crossed a line in my mind a long time ago. Then, another voice. From the stairs. I'm pregnant too. Helen. Her voice was flat. Her hands clenched around the railing. Her face was pale, drawn, terrified. Emily spun around. What? I was going to tell you both later, Helen said. But maybe later's already too late. My legs nearly gave out. No. She couldn't mean no. Emily looked from her mother to me. Slowly. Carefully. Then her eyes landed and stayed on me. Is it, she began. Helen didn't answer. And I didn't breathe, no, I said, finally. My voice came out raw, like it had been sitting in my throat too long. Helen still hadn't moved from the stairs. Emily stood frozen, her breath coming short, arms crossed tight like she was trying to hold herself together with pressure alone. No what? Emily asked. No, I don't know if it's mine, I said, eyes locked on Helen. Because we didn't, I stopped. Lied. Half lied. Helen spoke softly. I found out last week. Before you and I, before anything almost happened. Emily looked like she might crumble. But you thought it could be his. Helen's eyes shimmered, and her voice dropped to a near whisper. Because I haven't been with anyone else. Not since, she didn't finish. I ran a hand down my face. This can't be happening. Emily's lips trembled. It already is. We stood there, three people with nothing left to pretend. The air was thick with heartbreak, guilt, and the weight of decisions that couldn't be undone. Helen stepped down one stair. Then another. She looked older than I'd ever seen her. Not in years, just an ache. I didn't plan this, she said. I didn't want this. But I didn't not want it either. And that's what scares me. Emily turned her back. You were supposed to be my mother. Helen's voice broke. And I still am. No, Emily snapped, without turning. Not anymore. I moved to speak, but Helen held up a hand. Don't defend me. Not to her. Not right now. I looked at them both. My wife. Her mother. And the child each carried. It was a choice now. No fantasy left. No maybe. No escape hatch. And I realized I had nothing left but the truth. I never stopped wanting to be loved, I said, voice barely steady. And I let that hunger screw up everything. I didn't cheat, not physically. But I was close, too close, and I didn't stop it. That's on me. Emily faced me, finally. Her eyes were wet but hard. You want to fix this? I don't know how. She nodded, lips trembling. Then go. I turned to Helen. She said nothing. Her hand hovered near her stomach, absent-minded, instinctive. She looked at me like she wanted to say don't leave, but knew better. I didn't touch her. I didn't kiss her. I just said, I wish I'd met you differently. And she whispered back, me too. Then I walked out the front door, alone. It's been 6 months since I walked out that door. 6 months since I left 2 women carrying pieces of me, one in memory, one in blood. And somehow, I'm still learning how to live with that. Emily and I haven't spoken much. We signed the papers quietly, without ceremony. She moved back in with her sister. Sent me a single ultrasound photo with no caption. I taped it to the inside of my closet, somewhere private. Somewhere I can look when the guilt gets louder than the silence. Helen didn't reach out. Not directly. But once, a few weeks ago, I got a letter. Handwritten. No return address. It just said, "You were never a mistake." Just a moment I wasn't ready for. And at the bottom, "He has your hands." I read that line maybe 100 times. People ask me now if I'm okay. I usually lie. But the truth is, there's a strange peace in losing everything you were pretending to hold together. I thought love was about control. Earning it. Keeping it. Turns out, love's messier than that. Sometimes it comes wrapped in bad timing and worse decisions. Sometimes it looks like betrayal, but underneath, it's just two people wanting to feel seen. Helen and I were never going to last. Not really. But for a few seconds, we understood each other better than anyone ever had. And sometimes, that's enough. The last time I saw her was by accident. A grocery store parking lot. She was carrying bags, alone. I offered to help. She didn't say yes. Didn't say no either. So I walked her to her car. Loaded the trunk. She asked how I was. I said trying. She looked at me for a long time. Her face older. Softer. Then she said, "He kicks when I hear your voice." And that broke me. Not in a tragic way. Not in a dramatic, movie-ending kind of way. Just, softly. Quietly. Like healing. I don't know what comes next. Maybe I'll co-parent. Maybe I'll be the weird story they tell at family dinners in 20 years. Maybe none of it matters as much as showing up. But I do know this, love isn't always right. It isn't always clean. But it's real. And sometimes, being real is the best we can do. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more slow burn, human feeling romantic dramas.